Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. Beijing is set to host Russian President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday. The visit comes just days after U.S. President Donald Trump's trip to China, underscoring how China's Xi Jinping is increasingly positioning his country at the center of global diplomacy. Now, the visit is expected to focus heavily on energy, trade, and strategic coordination as Russia leans further toward China under the weight of Western sanctions and the ongoing war in Ukraine. How this will all impact the world, we'll now discuss with our guest, Marcin Przychodniak, Analyst, Polish Institute of International Affairs. Good to have you with us. Welcome.
Well, welcome. Thank you for having me.
So, with just days after another high-profile trip, was this coordinated this way, you think, or is it just coincidental, and what does it mean?
Well, we cannot say for sure, of course. We don't really have access to the technicalities and the construction and the way how this relationship works. But I don't think there's much of coincidence in a sense. If you look at the history of meetings between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, it is not probably linked directly, but it almost happens or before or after the exchanges of Xi with the American president, or any other high-level exchanges between Chinese and Americans. So this is definitely going to be one of the major topics of probably not informing. I mean, Xi Jinping is not in a position to inform Putin about anything. I mean, he will probably exchange his ideas and will present to Putin what he discussed with Trump and the way how the cooperation between Russia and China could go on in the face of these exchanges with Trump.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you also, as your experience as a diplomat, looking at the kind of maybe signs of protocol or how Putin will be received. I mean, Trump was received on the highest level, very tightly choreographed, but all the red carpet was rolled out. Do you think Putin will get the same?
No, but it's probably not a sign of any kind of Chinese dissatisfaction with Putin. I mean, it's just a different relationship in a sense. I mean, Chinese don't really need to present Putin with symbolic gestures in order to make him feel better in a sense. That was probably one of the ideas with Trump, in order to let him feel special about how he is presented in China. And Putin doesn't need it, and China-Russia relationship is not in a stage when they need to share this kind of symbolics. They have practical things to discuss. They have certain topics and certain ways how to develop the strategic partnership. I mean, and we can probably mostly guess about the topics. I mean, not about the topics, but the specifics about the meetings. We will probably have some kind of statements, but then we don't really know. Well, it's very hard to get deeper into the real specifics.
Mm-hmm. Also, that relationship, you mentioned that China is not in a position to inform Putin. I mean, also how that balance has gone. It was called not that long ago, this no limits partnership, right, between Russia and China. Where are we with that right now?
Well, there are limits. There are limits, but it doesn't mean that these countries don't need themselves. In a sense, politically, economically, of course, Russia is a junior partner there and needs Chinese support in order to have a better economy, which is struggling because of the sanctions and different and the war situation. And then the Chinese assistance is crucial in that context. So Russians will definitely try to use this opportunity to have more support, but with a better price in a sense. I mean, the Russians are talking much about the Power Siberia 2, which is about to be discussed. I'm skeptical about any final agreements on the Chinese side, but definitely this is one of the topics. So yeah, and I said inform because, and I said there are limits because China doesn't treat Russia equally in that paradigm, in that relationship, but also understands that Russia has certain arguments and certain instruments that can work on Chinese behalf. So and both sides kind of understand the situation in a way that there is no need for real trust as the way the West understands it. It's not an alliance compared to what, like, I don't know, NATO or, you know, political relationships within the Western countries, when something which we call trust is perceived as obvious, right? No, China does not trust Russia, Russia doesn't trust China, but it doesn't stop them from actually cooperating in sectors that they find valuable and positive from their perspective.
And all those sectors, I want to ask you again, I mean, you mentioned this Siberia 2 pipeline. I think at this point China is buying something like a quarter or more of Russian gas and oil, and that's really critical. But I think also in the measure of how Putin is, he doesn't like to share power. He likes to be the top dog. So how much of, let's say, as you said, junior partner can he stomach? How much is he really going to follow that?
Well, I'm not a Russian expert, but as far as I know, I mean, there has been quite a strategic decision within the Russian power circle that I said junior partner, but they accepted it in a sense that they made up this strategic decision in order to engage in cooperation with China, which also means becoming a junior partner, becoming dependent. So in that sense, Putin is aware of it, but he accepted the situation. We might discuss whether he had choice or not. Probably no, because of his political decisions and war he engaged with and invaded Ukraine and so on and so on. But this is, I believe, an understanding within Russian power circles that this is an important relationship, and they need to somehow, that the dependence is something that comes with that. But it's needed from Russian perspective and for Russian interests. But he will try to use up the situation right now. And I mentioned power of Siberia too, because, you know, with all that has been happening in the Middle East and still happening, it still is happening, right? I mean, the blockade, whether it's actually is blockade right now, but the Strait of Hormuz things and the way how much China gets liquid natural gas from Qatar, and that might be a problem there with deliveries from the Middle East. Definitely Putin will use these arguments in discussion with the Chinese in order to speed up the process of negotiations over power of Siberia 2, where there has been some progress last year, but still they are far from reaching you know, sustainable agreement, especially on the prices.
I mean, with the relationship, you said it's complex, but they are there in terms of some things that are getting from each other. But just tell us your experience from China right now, apart from having a client in a sense. What does China really get tangibly out of that relationship? Will we hear about that? But besides the energy component, what can China gain from Russia and vice versa? Well,
Russia is a valuable partner because it puts the West, it gets the attention of West and specifically the United States. I mean, it keeps, as much as we can, as much as we might discuss it right now with, that it keeps American troops in Europe, right? And it's a hot topic right now, especially in Poland, right? But but it does, and with all the Russian activities, I mean, the invasion in Ukraine is one thing, and it serves Chinese interests for Russia not to win, but also not to lose there. It serves, but the all hybrid operations against Europe, as long as it doesn't become kinetic war, it very much serves Chinese interests, keeping Western focus, also keeping Americans, I mean, or at least pressuring Americans to be in Europe, to focus on these activities. So this is probably the main accomplishment, main benefit that China can get from its relationship with Russia. Besides any other more specific but also important ideas like the military cooperation, the way how Russia also supports China in East Asia. We observed a lot of different military activities with Chinese and Russian forces, in the Sea of Japan, for example, so there are certain specific elements that China gets from Russia, and that's also why it is very much is interested in keeping this strategic partnership.
So one last quick one, just a sentence. We've had now Donald Trump in Beijing, now Vladimir Putin. Where does this put China after these meetings are done?
I mean, it puts China in the center, and it's just, I think, this is the main idea here, right? I mean, to get, Xi Jinping, besides all the international aspects we have been talking right now, but also very much important internal aspects, right? I mean, Chinese Communist Party is starting the process of preparation for the next year's electoral, party meeting, which is about to happen in autumn 2027. But it requires, for Xi Jinping himself and the party apparatus, it requires preparation in order. It will be electoral summit, as I said. So they will elect a new central committee there. So it requires a certain preparations. Certain people needs to be approved, and Xi Jinping needs to be sure that his people will be elected within the party. So. And the successes and the visibility and the image of how important China becomes under his ruling, and how it is becoming a player, and he managed to manage the relationship with Trump first and keep up the benefits from this strategic relationship with Russia, which we had a lot of rumors about there are certain people in the party or in the army that were not very satisfied with Chinese support for Russia. So all these elements work on his behalf in this whole internal process also.
All right, so interesting stuff there. So Marcin Przychodniak, Analyst, Polish Institute of International Affairs, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks, but stay right here on TVP World for more. Goodbye.